How would you like to learn a skill that has been around for over 9,000 years? Learning to make wine is a very simple process. I became interested in home winemaking when I found some grapes vines in my backyard and decided to try my hand in fermentation. I have made my own wine from these vines and have done extensive research to learn what to do. Wine has been used as a social activity, and having wine that you made is a great for a conversation starter. When making homemade wine, there are three main steps to the process. First, you must sanitize all of your equipment you are going to use. You also have to sanitize as you go to keep the wine safe to drink. After you have everything clean, you will start the fermentation process. This will include crushing the grapes, adding yeast, and patience. The last step is to finish the wine by flavoring and bottling it. When finishing the wine, you still must make sure that everything is clean. The first step in making wine is to sanitize everything. Keeping equipment clean is very important in this winemaking process and is not difficult to do. Sanitizing is very important to keep the wine safe to drink. Cleaning and sanitizing are vital to good winemaking, according to Master Vintner Daniel Pambianchi. Cleaning prevents microbial spoilage in the wine that would give off a bad taste. It is the difference between a sound wine and a spoiled wine. When sanitizing the equipment, you are looking for microbial stability. This will prevent any remaining living microorganisms from affecting the wine. Love Brewing says that sanitizing wine can prevent infections that could ruin the wine or turn it into vinegar. There are several ways to sterilize equipment. An acceptable level of sterilization is possible using hot water at 80 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes, according to Daniel Pambianchi. This type of cleaning only works for most of the equipment, as some pieces cannot withstand this treatment. This is also an impractical treatment for home winemaking, as it's difficult and impractical to maintain such a temperature in the home setting. Using a sanitizing agent is a much more viable option for home winemaking. To do this, you add the sanitizing agent to hot water and you use a washcloth to clean all of the equipment. You then rinse it off and it should be good to use. Sanitizing equipment is important to have quality wine, and there are a couple ways to do that. After you finish cleaning all of your equipment, it is now time to start the fermentation. The second step of home wine making process is fermentation. To release the juice from the grape, you need to crush them into must. Grapes have historically been crushed by stomping them. Nowadays, we have presses and more sanitary methods. There are two main types of presses, a basket press and the newer bladder press. When using a basket press, you want to crank down the pressure discs until you get a steady stream of juice from the spout. You then wait until the flow has subsided to add more pressure, so as not to overload the tray. A newer piece of equipment is a bladder press. This piece uses water pressure in a bladder to compress the grapes in a steel cylinder, creating the same effect without cranking down. Must is a combination of grape juice and the skin and seeds. For red wine, the seeds and skins are left with the juice for the first part of fermentation to allow the tannins in them to color the wine. After the grapes are crushed, it is time for primary fermentation. For proper fermentation, the temperature of 69 to 79 degrees is needed according to the master vintners at Love Brewing. For a primary fermenter, you can use a 5-gallon bucket with a lid with a hole for a bung and an airlock. You will then leave the must in the primary fermenter for a week or so. According to Techniques in Home Winemaking, You will have to knock down the grape skins 3 times a day during this time period to prevent the skins from drying out and getting moldy. Once the wine is done in the primary fermenter, you will then need to move it to the secondary fermenter. This is where it will sit for the next couple of weeks to as long as you want. To move it over, you will need a racking cane. This will allow for you to move the wine without moving any of the seeds or skin. The second fermenter is usually a carboy or other storage container. After you finish racking the wine, you want to have the top of the wine as close to the top of the carboy as possible to eliminate air exposure. You can even add a little bit of store-bought wine to top off the carboy. Once you have the wine in the carboy, you can then put another bung and airlock in the top. You then let this sit for as long as needed or wanted. In the fermentation step, the grapes are crushed and fermented in 2 different containers. When you have decided that the wine has aged enough, then you are to the point of finishing the wine. The last step of home winemaking is to finish the wine. Depending on how long the wine was fermenting, you might need to add some flavor to it. If your wine has fermented too much, all of the sugar will be gone and it will leave you with a bitter drink. To fix this, you have to add potassium sorbate to stop the yeast from fermenting, and then you simply add more sugar. You can also add acids and tannins and other flavorings to the wine to make it more bitter or taste however you want. If your wine is flat, you can add some glycerin to it to give it some body. After you have the wine tasting how you like it, bottling is the next step. If the wine has not stopped completely fermenting and it is bottled, it will either shoot out the cork or break the bottle. You will need a corker and a racking cane as earlier. You will then rack the wine into the bottles and use a corker to cork the bottle. Flavoring and bottling are the last steps when making your wine. In conclusion, you now should be able to create a wine to share with your friends and have a new skill. Sanitation is a necessity when creating wines and is used throughout the winemaking process. Fermenting is the actual process of making wine and it is done in 2 steps. After you have the wine, you flavor it and then bottle it. Now you have learned a skill that is known by many over the course of 9,000 plus years.